Today we'll be taking a look at Doom on the PS4 and the Potato Masher. If you don't know, the Potato Masher is a $375 PC custom built in 2014 and designed to compete with the PS4 for the rest of its life cycle. The goal is not to pick on consoles, but to show that PC gaming can be just as good or better for the same money. If you've never watched one of my videos at 60 FPS, this is the video you need to do it. Also, I'm going to do a Q&A video very soon, so drop any questions you have in the comments and I'll answer as many as I can. The description has important links that I'll talk about more at the end of the video, but now let's get to it. I normally try pretty hard to show like-for-like comparisons in games, so I use a controller on the Masher to record footage that resembles the PS4 version in movement and speed. Today, that is not the case. Doom is the granddaddy of first-person shooters, and there's no way I'm going to use anything but a mouse and keyboard. I don't think controllers are bad for shooters, but nothing compares to the precision of a mouse. There will be a few other differences that you'll also see. Because of this, the Masher footage may appear to be twitchier or choppier at times due to me swinging the mouse around wildly. If you are new to PC gaming, it feels much more fluid when you're actually playing yourself, but I acknowledge that it's slightly harder to watch after the fact. Anyway, onto the graphics. The PS4 version of the game runs at 1080p and 60 FPS, however, it is not running at this resolution all of the time. In demanding sections of the game, the developers say that the resolution and visual settings dynamically scale to handle the workload. This way, the game can look as good as possible in most situations while maintaining 60 FPS. The PS4 comes close to this goal, as frame rate drops are fairly rare and Doom is one of the better looking console games to date. On the Masher, I could not maintain a locked 60 FPS at 1080p even on low settings. It had no trouble hitting 60, but it had trouble staying there in demanding areas. So this video clip is the last one you're going to see in this section at 100% resolution scale. Doom cannot automatically adjust the resolution scaling on the PC version, but it will let you do it manually. The UI and various other gameplay elements stay at 1080p, while the rest of the image can be rendered at a lower resolution and then upscaled with heavy anti-aliasing to make a smooth image. This has been used in good effect in Rainbow Six Siege and Quantum Break, among others, and it's a pretty decent way to get a good image on a console or lower-end PC. It looks better than simply running the game at 900p or 720p, while not quite matching a full 1080p image in quality. I experimented with settings and ended up at 1080p, 75% resolution scale, and medium visual settings. I did lower the texture page file setting and turned off compute shaders, as the former did not really make a visual difference and the latter is only properly supported on AMD or newer Nvidia cards. So while much of the game is not actually being rendered at 1080p, I'm calling it 1080p in this comparison because it is that resolution in the same way the PS4 is. Kinda, but not really. Now, you might be thinking that if the Potato Masher is running at a lower resolution scale than the PS4 version, it's going to look worse. The PS4 might scale down to that resolution or lower at times, but it will be higher most of the time, right? Well, that was my thought too until I did some comparisons. I picked several areas in the first hour of gameplay to record comparison footage. These areas were chosen completely by random, and I recorded the PS4 version first to avoid a bias towards areas the Masher might be strong in. Somewhat surprisingly, the Masher looks equal or better than the PS4 version in every comparison. The PS4 looks softer, like there's temporal anti-aliasing covering up a lower resolution or smearing the visuals. I don't want to call bull on the PS4 running at 1080p, but I strongly doubt it's running at that resolution most of the time. I've spent about 4 hours on this review just recording, re-recording, and checking comparison footage, so I'm fairly confident in saying that the PS4 version occasionally matches the Masher, but it never exceeds it. Most of the visual effects like reflections, textures, and shadows are all but identical across both versions, leaving the sharpness and clarity of the image as the main difference. Both platforms lose a few frames in fast action, but if you weren't watching the frame rate counter, you probably wouldn't notice. The PS4 version is also running heavier motion blur that looks good in a YouTube video, actually it looks smoother than the PC in the YouTube video, but is not what I would choose for a fast, twitchy shooter. It does not look as sharp or feel as fast. However, if you think I'm just dumping on the PS4 version and unfairly preferring the Potato Masher, I'm not. I actually think Doom is a somewhat poor port on the PC. It has aggressive VSync that tries to clamp the game down to 30 FPS if the frame rate dips below 60 at all. I ended up using adaptive VSync for most of this footage, which does allow the odd screen tear if the frame rate dips below 60, and then re-engages VSync when it hits 60 again. Some of Doom's graphics options also don't do a great job of indicating what they do. Compute shaders, texture page file, directional occlusion, and a few other settings can significantly impact frame rate without making a very noticeable visual difference, which could lead many people to having substandard experiences without knowing why. I also experienced some big frame rate variation, which we'll get into in the next section. There are many hardcore first-person shooter fans who maintain that you can't properly enjoy a shooter unless you're running an unlocked frame rate. VSync does add some latency, and 60 FPS is surprisingly considered low for some people. So all of this section's footage is unlocked and there is no VSync unless otherwise noted. Without changing any other settings, I was getting between 55 and 100 FPS in the earlier sections of the game. This does feel pretty great, I'm not gonna lie. If you thought the earlier Masher footage looked twitchy or choppy, you're probably not going to enjoy this section either, but I had a great time playing it. That is, until I got a little farther into the game. All of a sudden, the frame rate started dipping into the 30s and 40s. I was in a small indoor area, so this didn't make sense. I switched to 720p and very low settings, still with a 75% resolution scale, and the performance and GPU usage stayed almost the same. The game stayed in the 50s more, but it still had massive frame rate drops that did not make sense for the area. I re-enabled VSync temporarily to verify that wasn't the issue, and it didn't make a difference. Moving on, I reached a huge outdoor area and the same thing happened. Frame rates as low as 35 FPS or as high as 75 FPS at 1080p. I restarted the Masher and the same thing happened again. Changing nothing else, I restarted a second time and the problem cleared up. In the same outdoor section, I was now getting well over 100 FPS at times, and the average frame rate stayed above 70 most of the time. This happened in a few more sections farther on, but I don't have the space in this review to show them all. Now, these areas were fairly few and far in between, but they're there. I know what you might be thinking. The Masher does not meet the minimum system requirements for the game, so how can I complain about having performance issues, right? Well, the computer is clearly capable of running the game very well, more than matching the PS4's visuals and usually exceeding the frame rate by a good amount. Now, I'm not a game developer, and I certainly don't know everything about this, but performance swings of 35 to 110 FPS do not seem normal, and performance changing in one section after computer restarts also points to some optimization issues or something else weird going on. Online, tons of people are praising how well optimized this game is, but I've noticed that most of them are either using fairly high-end hardware or they are content with lower, variable frame rates. My suspicion is the higher-end hardware has enough extra performance in the proverbial tank to mask areas where the game struggles, giving the impression that everything is running great. However, I also have friends with 980 Ti's who are seeing performance drops, and other friends with older cards that are having a great time, so there's obviously an inconsistent level of performance across different combinations of hardware. Now, wanting to be thorough, I booted up my own machine because I've talked to my friends and I've played on the Potato Masher, but I wanted to see how it would work on my personal gaming PC, which is running a 4790K, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 980 Ti. So, performance-wise, it should have plenty to work with, but I'm also trying to play the game at 4K, so it's going to get pushed really hard. And I saw a similar problem happening, although not quite to the same extent. So in the same areas, my computer was not dipping quite as far. Here I'm playing on high settings at 4K, trying to hit 60 FPS. And most of the time, it's totally great, everything's fine, no issues. And then in some usually smaller indoor areas, it seems to have frame rate trouble. And then in the larger outdoor areas, it seems to run it a lot better. So that goes back to what I think about there possibly being some optimization issues in the game. Unless there's something going on in the graphics that I'm not aware of, it's unusual for a small indoor area to run worse. So here's more footage of me just moving through a couple different areas. Overall, still running great, but there are some odd performance drops in a few areas, and it's somewhat consistent, and after restarting the game, some of those drops were still there and some of them weren't. So reading online, it's not happening to everyone, but it is happening to enough people that I think it may be some sort of optimization issue that hopefully will get fixed later, whether that's a patch by the developers or an NVIDIA driver update. And it's not like it makes the game unplayable. Honestly, on the Potato Masher, unless the frame rate dropped into the 30s, I didn't really notice the drops until like the low 50s. It wasn't that bad, it wasn't that big of a deal, but you know, the frame rate wasn't staying at a completely locked 60, and that's what I was aiming for, and I wanted to report it to you guys, but I also wanted to show that it was doing the same thing on my computer so that you could see the difference. A lot of people are reporting very favorable performance with this game online, but that doesn't mean there can't be issues for other people, and it also doesn't mean the game is completely broken. It might just mean it has a couple issues that still need to be ironed out. Overall, it seems like it's had a very strong launch. No. It can't even do a full 1080p in every section, so everything else is obviously off the table. Doom is a great game. I know I just talked about a lot of things I don't like, but the game itself is fantastic. I've been burnt out on story-based first-person shooters for a while now, but Doom is a breath of fresh air. The unapologetically old-school music, brutality, and over-the-top gameplay design are exactly what me and many other gamers have been waiting for. As much as I might think the optimization needs work, the Potato Masher delivers an overall great experience. If you are insistent that games need to stay perfectly locked to one frame rate, then you will either want high-end hardware or low-end standards. If you're okay with some variation and occasionally suboptimal frame rates, the Masher's mouse and keyboard and fluidity blow the PS4 out of the water most of the time. I think your preferences will dictate which platform you should enjoy the game on, but I'll take the PC. If you enjoyed this video, check out the original build video or any of the other Potato Masher videos linked on screen. This project was started by the Casual Shenanigans Gaming Podcast, so click the link to check us out. You can support this channel and the Potato Masher project by tossing me a few bucks on Patreon. It helps me test new games quicker and better, so thank you for your support. Also remember to drop your questions in the comments below for the upcoming Q&A video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.